if we'd literally just taken the original source and tried to make that run in VR, it just would be a subpar experience.
Welcome to our studio. This is Simon. You are better known as Dr. Beef. We have Dr. Beef in our studio. That's you feel like royalty to come into our studio after all you've brought to the masses out here. Tell me how you started becoming a VR developer and what got you interested in it in the first place.
Well, I guess it goes all the way back to the original DK1, the very first Oculus dev kit. I've always enjoyed gaming. But when I first sort of stumbled across the Kickstarter, I'd missed the opportunity to actually get one of the original Kickstarter units. But I signed up as quickly as I could to get hold of the original dev kit, and it sort of went from there. I mean, obviously, those early days, there wasn't much in the way of content. So there was, the odd sort of tech demo that people had thrown together, and then there were things like injection drivers. So I think a lot of people are aware of Vorpex, which is sort of one of the more popular current ones. So I got involved fairly early on in Vireo Perception, which was like basically a DirectX 9 injection driver that allowed you to play some of the games that you'd normally play on your monitor on the dev kit. And it kind of went from there, really. So I just sort of started tinkering with that project, got involved in that, and moved on up the dev kits through the DK2, and then I got a Gear VR, and I started doing a bit of dev for that. And that's where Quake first happened. The rest is history, really.
And so, list off all the games that you have sort of ported to VR. What? Give us the full list.
Okay, so first there was Quake, then there was Half-Life. Then I think it was Quake 2 after that, Quest Z Doom, then Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and then most recently Doom 3.
Yeah, that's quite a collection, and I've been constantly blown away. It was amazing to go into Doom, the original Doom, alone, but everything is kind of like you've got those cardboarded textures, kind of like rotating at you. But it feels like you're actually in those rooms because it's just the sense of presence is really stellar in there. Was it a surprise to you that you could actually get Doom 3 running on a Quest?
Well, yeah, very much so. I mean, it always been sort of one of the goals is to attempt it at some point, and it was never a certainty. And actually, if we'd literally just taken the original source and tried to make that run in VR, it just would be a subpar experience. But there's a chap called Emil, who's better known as Beloko. He's done a number of Android ports of a lot of the sort of classic id Software games, and he'd actually implemented a multi-threaded renderer for Doom 3, and that was a really good starting point. So we took that, and we got that running on the Quest, and it worked very well, but it wasn't quite fast enough. So we then added OpenGLES Multiview, which is the sort of approach where it can actually draw the two iframes without having to do all the back-end processing twice. And that was enough to make it just run smoothly as it needed to on the Quests. From that point forward, it was just great, really. But it was something of a surprise to actually be able to get Doom 3 running as well as it actually does. So, that was quite a win, I'd say.
And now that one still runs on the original Quest. And I guess I'm wondering if you decided to port something that was Quest 2 only, how recent do you think you could go with a game? And is there a dream game that you would like to see ported, or have you already gotten it?
Well, I think the problem is there's a dependency on the actual software being open source. As far as sort of modern games go, I think Doom 3 is I'm quite happy to be corrected, but Doom 3 is probably one of the most recent, well-known, popular games that actually has its engine code open sourced. After that point, I think id Software stopped doing that. There's not many game studios will actually open source their engine software. It's a bit of a shame. I think the game I would most like to do, but I think will probably never happen, is Half-Life 2. Because I'm slightly ashamed to admit I've never played all the way through it. And also, I got halfway through playing it on the original dev kit, but never finished it. It would just, it's one of those games that we get asked about all the time. there's somebody who's managed to do some sort of Android port somehow. I don't know how they've done it, but it's not like a truly open source engine port. So I think there would be some risks entailed with trying to pick that up. So as it stands, I think that game is out of reach. But that would kind of be the dream game to bring to the Quest. But I fear it's probably never going to happen.
What is this? So you've had some communications with John Carmack. I noticed he talked about that on Twitter, I think. What have you talked to him about? And, what do you think Facebook thinks of what you do? And what do you think the next steps are going to be for some of these ports? Are you going to be able to get on AppLab?
Well, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's not like John Carmack and I have secret conversations. So everything that everybody saw on that very short Twitter interaction was literally as much as I also know. I sort of get the impression that he would be quite keen for some of the ports anyway to actually make it to the Oculus Store properly, as long as they are officially licensed, and there were no sort of copyright issues or anything like that. And that would be great to see. But, I don't think that's going to happen quickly. And I don't think it'll be all that easy to achieve. And it won't work for all of the ports either. I mean, there's, for example, Half-Life, that will never be on the Oculus Store. It's not actually the Valve Gold Source engine it's using. It's just like a fan project anyway. Yeah, so whilst some might make it, I'm thinking immediately of Quake. That's probably the most likely of all of them and is certainly one that I know John Carmack himself has played. Beyond that, I don't really know. It's hard to say. I'm not sure they are likely to make it onto AppLab because, well, there's a variety of reasons. I think copyright is probably one of the issues, because to create the store listing, we would have to use images and gameplay footage, and we don't own that. That doesn't belong to us. We're perfectly free to make changes to the engine and release it in a way that people can install it on their Quest. But trying to put that onto a store that is run and managed by Facebook, I think, is possibly never going to work out without all the proper legal agreements in place, as you can imagine. So,
maybe it's unfair to put this question to you, but as someone who has taken Facebook's platform to such an extreme, right? It seems to me like you are one of the people kind of testing the limits of what Facebook will allow. It's not, you're not doing anything that anyone else on side loading or side quest isn't doing. You're using the same routes everyone else is. But you've been there since the beginning, and you were there buying, interested in VR before Oculus got bought by Facebook. And I guess I'm wondering how you feel about the Facebook account requirement and how you think Facebook is treating developers and the overall marketplace.
Well, I must admit, as far as the ports are concerned, I'll admit I'm slightly concerned that the longevity of the current side-loading approach is probably potentially under threat. It's hard to say. I mean, they'll make changes at the drop of a hat without, they don't have to consult the community. They've sold so many millions of units of Quest devices now that most people are probably completely unaware of side Quest. It's probably only like a percentage of Quest owners, a smallish percentage, that are aware of it. So if they were to introduce something that then subsequently prevented people side loading and they were forced to use the AppLab route, then I suspect that would probably spell disaster for most of the ports, and which is why I kind of pitched that question out there and hoped that John Carmack would reply to it. I don't know. I sort of feel like if you read a lot on Reddit, for example, the Oculus Quest sub, then people's opinions of Facebook are pretty well known. I don't think I'm saying anything wrong to say that I think they generally don't have the most positive reception, particularly in the VR world. But they've also, by the same token, they've done an awful lot for VR. They've introduced low cost, high quality hardware that just wouldn't be around otherwise. So you can't be too critical. But yeah, I think as a sort of hobbyist developer, I think I would be very disappointed if my ability to get these ports and other hobby projects out to the masses in the way that we currently can is taken away. I mean, that would just be a big disappointment, and I'm not entirely convinced that's not going to happen. But yeah, we shall see, really.
Yeah, that's such a nuanced answer. I appreciate everything you've said there, because it's not, Reddit is not a representative crowd of, who owns Quests or buys Quests or would be interested in buying Quest. Obviously, there's been a lot of people learning about VR and the power of VR through Quest, and there's benefits to linking your Facebook account to be able to socially connect with others. That I understand why Facebook is sort of pushing that. But
Yeah.
I think of open computing and the idea of being able to do what you want with your device. And as a hobbyist developer, you're at the whims of the platform holder to a certain extent. And you've done some other crazy things beyond just the ports, right? You've done some other projects. Can you tell us about some of those?
Are you referring to the sort of injection driver stuff earlier on?
Didn't you also do some 6DoF tracking for Gear VR?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So when I did Quake on the Gear VR originally, it was obviously just Quake running with 3 degrees of freedom. So the gun was kind of attached to your face and wherever you looked, etc. But Google then released this thing called AR Core, which is like the bit like a sort of tracking technology, and mapping as well. So it can, the camera can sort of map objects and track the position of the phone in space. So I was able to sort of mash the two together. So we had Quake Gear VR running with this Google AR Core as part of a sort of rudimentary positional tracking. So you could actually move around in Quake in a way that you couldn't do with, I think, pretty much any other Gear VR game. So that was quite cool. And actually it kind of then fed very nicely into the original Quake port that we did for the Quest, because it already had some positional tracking built into it. So it was then just a case of utilizing what the Quest offered rather than sort of Google's AR Core stuff. So.
And I guess, and that used the single camera on the Gear VR, the outward-facing camera. Did it overheat those phones pretty fast?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, you couldn't play it for that long. I mean, the Gear VR was sort of notorious for getting hot and having to shut down reasonably quick anyway. So yeah, when you're running a fairly intensive positional tracking software in addition to the port at the same time, it didn't run for a great deal of time. But it was novelty more than anything else.
So you've been a hobbyist developer. Do you have a day job in VR, or would you like a day job in VR? And where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, I am a software developer by trade. I'm not actually in VR or games. This part of the reason why it's sort of such an enjoyable hobby for me. It's a bit of a busman's holiday, but at the same time, it's completely different to my day job. Would I like a job in VR? I don't know. I must admit, I'm not sure who I would want to work for. I'm quite a sort of low-level developer, C++ and Java. They're kind of my languages of choice. I'm not really a sort of Unity or Unreal Engine type developer. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe sometime in the future, maybe if I ever got lucky and managed to take early retirement and, was looking for a job that I felt I could enjoy as more of a sort of hobby job. But at the moment, I'm not really looking for work in the VR industry. I'm quite happy doing this sort of hobbyist thing.
A lot of the early days of VR were debating comfort settings and whether games needed to be built from the ground up for VR for them to be compelling. And I am one of these people that gets very sick very easily with bad comfort settings. I've been going back and forth with you saying, does it have teleport and those types of things when you've been rolling out these ports. I remember going into Doom 3 and I spent maybe a good 20 minutes recording just the first 20 minutes of the game and running through all the different sections. And all I had was stick turning, snap turning, as well as straight forward and back with the other controller. And it felt fine, more or less. Like it just, I was so blown away by the quality of that world and the depth of it. All the voice acting and using the flashlight to sort of light up various things that my brain wasn't really too concerned about the comfort settings, and it worked really well. I guess I'm surprised that there isn't like an effort at Facebook to reach out to some well-loved old games and get them ported properly to VR using great comfort settings and getting them performant on a Quest device. And do you think that's something Facebook would ever pursue? And have they tried to sweep you up and get you a job?
No, they've not tried to sweep me up. As for whether it's something they'd pursue, I'm not sure it's likely Facebook would pursue it. I think it's possible that another studio might decide to look back at some of their old IP and think, yeah, maybe we could do something with that again. It might not take too much to polish it up and make it quite enjoyable in a sort of VR setting. I mean, as most of the ports already attest, I mean, they do work surprisingly well, going from a flat screen into virtual reality. But I understand, particularly the likes of Doom and Quake, they're very fast-paced, and there's a lot of bouncing around and, explosions and quick movement, and it's a bit of a recipe for nausea, really, for a lot of people. Yeah, some of the slower-paced titles I could imagine probably getting picked up in the future and given a polish, and who knows what to say will happen. Yeah, whether Facebook will do it, I'm not convinced they will. I think they'd expect other studios to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Myst is one of those ones that just hit Quest, and it was sort of seemed to be rebuilt from the ground up for VR. At least that's how it felt inside there. And it had a lot of those best practices in place where you can fast travel up the ladder and snap turning and all those things to make it a really comfortable experience. And like you said, it's slow. There's no jumping.
Yeah.
There's a lot of titles out there that could get that treatment going back to the beginning of gaming. And it seems like a low price way of bulking up some of the offerings out there if you could really get those great comfort settings in there and bring some of those old titles. So I guess I'm surprised it's not more common than it is.
I think I am to some extent as well. I'm also slightly surprised that there aren't other developers churning out ports. It's an odd one, really, because there's plenty of very talented developers out there who are more than capable of picking up the SDK and wrapping these games in the VR SDK and releasing them. They're also not happening with any sort of frequency. So I don't know, maybe there's just no appetite for revisiting some of these old engines and bringing them to VR. I mean, I say that actually, there's a lot of the ports that we've done on the Quest, they have counterparts on PC VR anyway. So these are sort of already reasonably popular on the PC. So, having a Quest variant isn't that surprising.
Do you have any sense of how many people have downloaded your ports at this point, or by game? Can you break it down in any way? I'm curious how many people it's reached.
Well, there's pretty detailed stats on SideQuest. I must admit, I haven't actually looked that recently. Doom 3, that's must be well over 30,000 downloads by this stage. I've not actually checked the figures recently. I know Lambda 1 VR, which is the sort of Half-Life implementation, that must be over about 100,000 downloads by now. And then there's Quest Z Doom. I think that was very popular. All in, there's probably hundreds of thousands of downloads. Whether they're unique to the number of people that have played them or not, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's got surprisingly large reach.
Do you have any advice we have lots of people out there that are just getting into VR for the first time. You've obviously got you're an established software developer to begin with, but I guess I'm wondering if you can provide any advice for people out there that would want to make VR games or even port their passion project. What should they do, and what routes would they take to do that?
Unless they're an existing software developer, I wouldn't recommend trying to do a sort of port of an old engine. I think that would probably be a step too far. But just downloading something like Unity and just having to play around, not being afraid to make mistakes, because I can't count the number of times I've bodged something up and broken all the code and had another go, and a few attempts later it starts working, and that's the moment you think, yes, I've done it. Just give it a try. It's amazing what you can throw together in these things. I must admit, I'm no Unity developer myself, but you see some of the projects on SideQuest, and they're just brilliant. And they're one person, in their bedroom tinkering away on these things, and it's just go for it. You never know; it might be a a future career in the making. So,
Mm-hmm. And I think last question I have on my mind today is, what are you working on now with regards to your VR hobby, and what do you want to work on in the next few months?
Well, right now, I've been very fortunate to be have been sent a B Haptics haptic vest and armbands and a head thing as well. So at the moment, we're looking at incorporating haptic feedback for the vest, etc., into Doom 3 and some of the other ports as well. Very excited. I mean, it's a great piece of kit, so it's going to be great fun once that gets up and running. So that's currently the in progress piece of hobby work going on. After that, that's a very good question. I'm not exactly sure what the next thing's going to be. When we finished Doom 3, I was saying, I'm going to take a bit of a break now. Then B Haptics got in touch. So looking at that's kind of fun and a little bit different. After that, I don't know. I'm inclined to wait a while and see how things go with Facebook and SideQuest and App Labs and what direction things take. I've got a couple of ports in mind that I might have a tinker around with. And I know Baggy G, who's one of the members of Team Beef, if you will, is also looking at a couple of things himself. So, there's stuff going on in the background, but I wouldn't want to commit to anything at this stage. Don't want to get people's hopes up.
To be clear, have you submitted Quake to App Lab, or is there an immediate intention to do that?
No, so I got halfway through the App Lab application and then realized that we were going to have to create things like screenshots and, video footage, etc. And that's where it started to become a, can we really do this kind of situation? That's when there was the very brief Twitter conversation with John Carmack. And at that point, put the application process on hold. So, wait and see. So people can still access it through SideQuest, so it's not like it's gone away. So
makes sense. I think it's Facebook seems to respond, at least indirectly in some ways, to the community. They're going to make their decisions based on what's in the best interest of Facebook. But I'm sure there is an appetite for App Lab, getting great ports onto the Quest without having to have a PC involved in the process. There's got to be an appetite out there for those. And so I wonder, I guess, the community out there watching this, is there anything they can do to support or ensure that these things happen more often?
That's a good question. I must admit, I don't really know what the answer to that one is. I think going back to the Oculus Quest subreddit, it does seem that a number of Oculus employees are reasonably frequent visitors and, they do listen to the community. How much of a sway they then subsequently can have internally within Facebook, it's difficult to say now. Yeah, so I don't really know how much of an impact the community can make on trying to get these ports onto App Lab or even the main store.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much for the time. We've got Dr. Beef in our studio. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we can have you on in the future. And I'm on behalf of our viewers out there who I'm sure have loved your ports. I've loved it. Thank you for bringing them to VR, and they're incredibly fun. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much.